is going on, everybody? Happy Wednesday to all of you beautiful people. I am here with my co-host and new friend, Drew McCaughey. I'm sure I fucked that up. I'm sorry.
Nope, you didn't. It was
Okay,
perfect.
sweet. All right. And we are jumping in on Wednesday to have some high vibe conversations and really just to talk about all things energy and personal empowerment, simply because we're both service centered people and we feel it's really important to get the information out to whomever it is that needs to hear it. Also, I just love bringing energy and joy into the world, just like my fellow energetic, I don't know, magnet Drew. And so we're hoping that in this time with you guys that we uplift you, you know, encourage you to take care of yourself so that you operate from a high energetic state and also educate you about what high vibe and all things energy and personal empowerment are. So Coach Drew, thank you so much for joining me on this new endeavor.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie. What a great idea. It was funny because we were having a conversation, one of many we've had recently, since we just met recently in the last month or so, last week. And we were just sitting there having this conversation. And you said, I think some people would like to eavesdrop in on our conversation. What do you think about doing a live? I'm like, that's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, I love that you said yes, because part of being in joyful spirits, which you're energetic, right? If you're energized, you're joyful, is you get these insights. And a lot of times, especially in the past, I didn't listen to those insights, but now I go with the flow. And as soon as you said yes, I'm like, it's a done deal. Now we just have to pick a date and let's do it. So thank
Yeah.
you
And
so much.
thank you. And Wednesday's a perfect day because this is a day in the middle of the week when a lot of people are going, oh man, I just got to get through to Friday and I got the weekend. Thought maybe we'd be able to share some insights, some information, and just some energy, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, I asked you before we got on camera, what is it? How can I introduce you? And you said peak performance, high vibe, something. So why don't you tell the audience what it is you exactly do?
So I'm a peak performance flow state activation and plant medicine coach. So in essence, what I do is I teach people how to allow themselves to operate more consistently at elevated or in elevated states of consciousness.
Yeah.
That's in essence that's what I do, and there's a lot of different ways that you can get there, and operate there, and plant medicines are some of them. So that's it.
Yeah, I love that. And so, you know, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm an addiction and mental health recovery coach who is very knowledgeable about quantum physics and neuroscience. And so I have shared with Drew in the past, I have trepidation and kind of lean right now away from plant medicine as a way to get into healing and high vibrational states. But I do believe that knowledge is power. And I also believe that as we have these conversations, we learn more and hopefully establish guidelines or understandings that may help me change my perspective or may help me keep my perspective. But whatever the case is, I think it's truly important to give voice to all ideas and understandings, because when we come together collectively, that's truly, I believe, where the power of healing and you know positive energy stems from, right?
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And everybody's, got a certain skill set. Everybody's got their own perspective, and just listening to other people's perspective can sometimes, give you an insight or help you be more convinced that your perspective for you is correct.
Yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah.
I mean, it just having a discussion doesn't hurt anybody, right?
Love that. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, I think I have elevated my own energy experience, having gone through a myriad of addictions and mental health struggles myself through the lens of curiosity and remaining open to new possibilities and not judging or assuming that I have it all figured out. I think once we go there, we really limit ourselves to the experiences that this opportunity, being a human, provides us
Right.
and keeps us from a deeper understanding, really, of ourselves.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a never-ending process.
Yeah.
This thing we call life. I mean, we're always learning something new, and that's what we're here to do, right? So we're here to sift and sort and figure out what we like and figure out what we don't like and what's for us and what's not for us. And so, you're never going to know it all. You're never going to get it right. It's not a diploma you're hanging on your wall and you got it forever. You got to reset yourself every day and get yourself going every day. And, I want to be clear too, though, about the plant medicines, because a lot of people, when I say that, they automatically think, oh, you're talking about psychedelic stuff. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm not really referring to anything psychedelic. I'm referring to specific plant medicines that can help your body, support your body, supplement your body to produce specific things in your body that help you operate at more peak performance, pleasure inducing, performance enhancing levels.
Yeah.
So just to
Well,
throw
I
that
love
out.
that. And I think over the course of however many weeks this unfolds into, right? Obviously we'll have a beautiful opportunity to dive into that, because I think,
Sure.
again, the more information that people have, the more informed decision making they're able to make. So first off, for anybody who's watching, this is live, but you can type into the chat any questions that you might have about plant medicine, vibrations, personal empowerment, addiction, and mental health. Obviously, that's our kind of skill set. We're always looking to engage. This is an interactive conversation, or at least we hope that ends up being the case. And if there's any specific topic that you would like to see Drew and I touch upon, feel free to hit our QR codes. You can leave us messages or kind of learn more about us individually, and we'll be happy to touch upon those subjects in future episodes. So I just want to put that out there. So I want to talk about your website. So something that you have front and center, which I love, actually, it may not be on your website, I think it's on your Facebook page, is the map of consciousness. Now, there's so many different iterations, right? But I know it to be the map of consciousness. I know what that is, but I think it's really important for anybody who's watching this and starting to get curious about energy or learn about what it is Drew and Carrie are showing up and trying to talk about. It's really important that we highlight what it is that you have on your Facebook page and that I'm very knowledgeable about. So why don't you start to share what it is you know about the map of consciousness, and then I'll add my insights afterwards so that people can have a better understanding of why we work toward maintaining a high vibration or high energy throughout our own days.
That's a great place to start, Carrie. And I know that you're much more knowledgeable about that than I am. I use it as a tool. So it really came along to me sort of after the fact. But basically, that map helps us understand where people operate most consistently in terms of their emotional frequencies. And all emotions, all thoughts actually have an energy, right? So thoughts are things. We got to start there. Thoughts create an energy. And particularly emotional thoughts are really strong energy frequencies. And our bodies react to those frequencies. So let's start there. Then the map was developed by David Hawkins years ago, and he realized there's a correlation between people's most consistently experienced emotional levels, if you will, to where their bodies operate in terms of a frequency. So he put together a little map, a scale, if you will, that we can use to actually do some muscle testing and figure out where they operate most consistently. And I always say most consistently because the map goes from, say, 20 to 1,000, right? With 1,000 being the highest vibrational frequency, if you will, emotional frequency. That's where you're operating at your best, if you will. Well, the the difference is because most people operate around worry, frustration, overwhelm, and fear so much, most people operate at 200 points or below in today's world. And our work, what we are here to do, is to help people understand that they can move up the scale. Now, it's where you're operating most consistently that's the most important, because if you're doing something you're having a lot of fun with, like, I don't know, downhill skiing, surfing, whatever it is that sailing, that can move you up that scale and get you into what the scientists refer to as states of flow. That's why I say flow state activation. And if you're doing something you don't necessarily like, it can move you down the scale and you're moving farther away from the state of flow. But that's relying on an outside activity to get you into that state, right? That's relying on something outside of you. Our objective is to have you understand how you can do it yourself, move up that, and then sustain those levels all day long, or for as long as you can. You got it with practice, it gets better and better and better and better. But that's basically, in a nutshell, how I use it. Explain to everybody more details about what you know.
Yeah, well, so I mean, you're spot on, right? Dr. David R. Hawkins, guys, was a psychiatrist and medical doctor. His practice was based out of New York City. He's prolific. And he created this map in the 1970s after having, an experience himself. He was very apathetic. He saw all of these people who were emotionally distressed, and despite his greatest efforts, there was very little change and how they experienced life, and he was dejected. And then one day he kind of had this insight, this aha moment, much like Eckhart Tolle and a lot of spiritual people talk about, where they kind of just, it clicked. And what he realized was there was a way to measure, much like you said, Drew, the experience that one is having on a regular basis. And so he used a logarithmic scale, which is a scale that measures the vibration within earthquakes, and kinesiology, right? Muscle testing,
Mm-hmm.
which is, there's resounding evidence that muscle testing works. Herbalists use it to find out what works for an individual. People use it to recognize whether they are, making a choice that is beneficial or not. Your muscles are going to respond and tell you what is right for you before your thinking mind will ever figure it out, because we are energy. And so what he did was he amassed 20,000 plus researches all over the globe to ensure that it was not biased, and he created this map. And so for me, doing a lot of work with people who operate in those consistent states of shame, guilt, right, apathy, right, people who are struggling with addiction, generally after trying so many things to quit whatever it is they're struggling with, they're like, forget it, I'm never gonna heal, so I'm just gonna stay in this apathetic state, which is incredibly dangerous too, because you can't shift out of that energy if you've just kind of given up and accepted that as your experience. And so really for me, I use this map to give people who are struggling in a lot of those lower energetic states of mind permission to forgive themselves. Because if we are constantly sitting in a state of guilt or shame over an experience we had 20 years ago with an ex-boyfriend or our child, right? 20 years later, we're still sitting in this energy that hasn't really existed for 20 years, but we've condemned ourselves to that, right? So it's near impossible to heal from addiction when you're sitting in those. I mean, it is. It's just 100% impossible. And then when you look at, a lot of the systems that we have for addiction recovery and mental health recovery, you see why the rate of relapse and the consistent struggle to increase medication and all of that is happening, because people aren't getting to the root cause of why they're struggling with addiction and or mental health issues in the first place. So that's really how I start to use that map of consciousness. And the reality is, and Drew, I know you'll attest, I can immediately tell when somebody's shifted into a new state of consciousness, new energy, a new thought pattern. They're lighter. They tend to just be more joyful. They're more hopeful about the outcomes of the work that they're doing. And it's not a magic pill, guys. Like, I want to be really clear. Yes, there are tools and strategies that will help shift you there. But what Drew alluded to is its practice. So right before this show, I did a yoga practice to really get into a flow state, right? That was the choice, because prior to that, I was doing billing, and who gets energized when they're doing bills? Like, that's lame. So I wanted to be able to show up in joyful spirit. And so it's a practice of making those choices to constantly put you in a state that is compassionate, that is loving, that is gentle, that is curious. And that way you can really start to feel that energy shift in you, and it builds momentum. And that's where we then start to see that healing happen more quickly with the tools and the choices that both Drew and I teach our clients to lean into to help them heal, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I use a pendulum for the muscle testing. It's
Yep.
just an extension of that, right? The pendulum tells me I just ask the quantum field, where do they operate, and
Yep.
I'll get the answers through the pendulum. It's so, again, there's lots of different ways to do it. Lots of different things, tools you can use, but yeah, that's the objective. Get you operating in those, around, at least around joy, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere in there, more consistently, and then gradually move yourself up into love and appreciation
Yeah.
and operate more consistently there. What I love is, as you said, you can tell when somebody's there, like you can see the shift. What I love about it is what happens when they go out into the world and they're able to maintain or sustain these higher elevated states, because all of a sudden, I'll give you a perfect example. I have a friend who used to he's very familiar with metaphysical, right? Lots of metaphysical. He's read a lot of things about metaphysical, but he's also been through a lot of stuff. So let's just call it that. And he had a pattern where he'd wake up pretty good, and then somewhere along the line, mid-morning, he'd get slapped in the face with something that would spiral him down in his emotions, and he would get into a state where he basically would shut down, have an anxiety attack, sort of. He would just take himself out of the fold completely until he could try to figure out what's going on. And it was his pattern, and he knows it, and that's fine. And again, that's fine. You don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? So wherever you are, it's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it, right?
Yeah, you're supposed to be there.
Yeah, I've been there. Anyway, so the example is that one day I saw him after work, and this was, I don't know, a few months after working with me, whatever it was. And he said, "I got to tell you what happened today." I said, "Okay." He said, "I went to work and I thought to myself, man, I'm really not motivated to be here today." And then he said, "Wait a minute. I don't have to think that." And I went, whoa, nice. Good catch. And he said, yeah. So then I thought, well, what would it feel like if I was motivated to be here today? What would I feel like? Well, I'd feel like this. And then I'd probably feel like this. And then I'd probably feel like this. And then all of a sudden, he said, I'm working my way up the spiral. And the rest of my day went perfect, just like smooth as silk. I was in a good mood the rest of the day. It was amazing. He looked at me and he said, I never knew I had that kind of power.
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's your power. That's how powerful you are. You can shift that on a dime once you know how and once you've practiced it.
Yeah. Well, it comes to so a couple things you highlight that I want to highlight for our community is one, you talk about self-awareness, and that alone is a practice, because if you're
Mhm.
not used to, or if you don't have any skills in being aware of your repetitive thoughts, then that's the beginning of the work, because you want to start to learn what it is that you're consistently thinking, right? Because you said this gentleman was aware of his repeated habit of dipping.
Mm-hmm.
So that's super important. And then secondly, it is then making a different choice, right? And taking
Mm-hmm.
action. And I think that's super important, because I hear a lot of people, who are interested in vibration stuff, and they're like, oh, I'm going to be super joyful, blah, blah, blah. But then something happens and they immediately lose sight of what their focus was. And I tell people, just make a different choice. You can make, like, even if it's 2 hours later and you're like, oh crap, I feel like crap, make a different choice. And that's work, and that's really, really important. But I do want to touch upon something you said when you were explaining the map of consciousness, and I want to get your perspective, because I see it a little differently. I don't know that I believe all our thoughts create emotional power. I think a thought that we have for a certain amount of time has power. But if I have a thought and I'm like, oh, well, that's just a thought, that doesn't serve me, and I move on to another thought, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know that I necessarily cultivated an emotion to that thought, but rather just recognize that it's a thought that whatever, right? And the reason I bring that up, guys, is we are operating from conditioned belief systems, patterns, and behaviors, right? Whether or not you believe in past lives or not, or just from in utero until this experience now, we're constantly being conditioned. We're constantly being infused with information. And so our thoughts are directed because of the information, because of the behaviors, because of the patterns that we've been exposed to. But if we just simply say, oh, that's just a thought, but that's not true for me anymore, I don't necessarily have an emotional response to that.
Well,
What
so
are your
so
thoughts about that?
well, so you just you talked about it earlier. It's called momentum, right?
Yeah.
So if you can catch it before momentum kicks in, then you're right. It's not going to have an influence on you. But most people don't do that.
Yeah.
And right now, what most people, the momentum point in this is law of attraction stuff. So momentum point in law of attraction used to be about 20 seconds. So if you think a thought which generates an emotion for about 20 seconds, momentum will kick in and you're going to get another one just like it, whether you want it or not, right?
Yep.
Well, with all the energy that's been ramping up in particularly in the last few months, but for sure over the last few years, it's now like 15 seconds. So because that energy is just getting higher and higher and faster and faster and faster. So now it's if you think a thought for about 15 seconds, you're going to get another one just like it, whether you want it or not. So that's the key. The key is the awareness. And you nailed it when you said the conditioning. See, most people are so used to operating around worry, frustration, overwhelm, doubt, fear. They don't even remember what it's like to operate in love or appreciation or joy. I mean, they've just forgotten because it's been so conditioned for them. And so they think that because everybody else is operating here in worry, frustration, and overwhelm, that, of course, that's where I operate. Because, well, if you what I try to help people understand is that if you can get yourself into experiencing these higher vibrational frequencies to start your day, right? And really allow your whole body to experience what that feels like, then boom, that one I got now, I don't want to have. If
Yep.
all of a sudden I'm worried about it, oh, wait a minute, I don't need to worry about that. So that's what my friend did. He caught it because he caught it before the momentum point. Because once momentum kicks in, so that first one grabs the second one grabs the third one grabs the fourth one, and now you're like a freight train rolling down a track at 100 miles an hour. It's really hard to stop that momentum.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I talk to people a lot about, because I do talk about meditation, obviously. And I ask people, do you meditate? And I'll get responses like, oh, I've tried it. It doesn't really work for me. Or, I just can't shut down my mind. And I understand that big time, which is why I don't teach shutting down your mind. But that's a different story. But I always ask, when are you trying to meditate? And 9 times out of 10, it's when they're right in the middle of something that's just got them all flabbergasted. It's like, oh, at lunch after you've had a morning full of the office beating you down. No, that's the hardest time. It's the first thing in the morning when you want to do this, so that it's for two reasons. Number one, when you're unconscious, when you're sleeping, law of attraction doesn't allow momentum to be created for the most part. You're not having a conscious thought. It's only when you're conscious that these thoughts start building that momentum. So when you first wake up in the morning, there's a little window right there, and you touched it on when you were talking about it. There's a little window right there where if you take that window, that moment, to actually establish where you are going to choose to operate from an emotional standpoint today, then it's a lot easier because you don't have momentum going the other way, right? You haven't thought about what happened 20 years ago yet. And that's what most people do. They wake up, they're pretty neutral, and they go, oh yeah, that thing that happened 20 years ago. And boom, 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 momentum starts. And now it's, oh, I can't, my bills and debt, and walk out the door, and you're just letting the universe dictate to you your mood, instead of going out there in your empowerment and dictating to the universe how you're going to experience your day.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's so funny. So my dear friend Yanko, who he I meditate in the morning and at night, but I've also meditated in the middle of like shit storms, right? Where I'm like, oh my God, I gotta breathe. And I always feel like crap. And one day, him and I think Nandar Matari, who's another amazing healer,
Mm-hmm.
they say, yeah, don't meditate when you feel like crap. And I'm like, oh yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. And I don't even know that I told him, but in my mind, I'm like, wow, because I feel good sometimes meditating, and sometimes I'm like, well, this is just awful. And then I get up and I'm like, forget about it. But you're right. It's just allowing yourself to do it before all of that mind chatter happens, right? That monkey mind, or I've heard it called ants, automatic negative thinking. And so I think for me, because I used to wake up in severe anxiety, like seriously, like that was my default. So I started a gratitude practice, which brought me into that neutral state. And then I set intentions before my meditation. So that way, much like you were saying, I'm creating a roadmap of how I want to experience my day, really how I want to experience my meditation too, because I know I'm making it clear that uh, I'm strategic in what it is I want to produce, and then I go into meditation. And that's just been really, really helpful for me to overcome a lot of that anxiety that I would wake up with and still occasionally do, right? Because of the many, many years that I was conditioned to just think along the lines of my negative thinking.
Yeah. And it's, intentions is a great word. People ask me sometimes, what are your goals? I'm like, I don't set goals. Like, I'm an energy guy, right? I understand energy and understand the energy and power of words and power of thoughts. And so a lot of times, if I'm going to focus on things that I want to focus on, I'm going to make those things something that is really easy for me to win at, really easy for me to go, I won, I won. And a lot of times goals have another end of that stick. So if you're talking energy, you're talking two ends of a stick. You got one end is the energy you want, and the other end is the energy you don't want, right? So two opposing energies. A lot of times when people set goals, they go, okay, so I want whatever. I'm going to set 20 appointments today, whatever that goal is. And if they don't reach it, they beat themselves up. It makes it really easy to go, I didn't hit my goal today, and it's easy to start going down. So I just set intentions, and I start every day with 4 main intentions, and I just let everything else fall where it may. So it's be an uplifter, a positive influencer, a co-creator of mutually beneficial relationships, and a conscious conduit of connection and collaboration. So those are my intentions. I walk out the door. Those are my 4 main intentions. I figure everything else will take care of itself from there. Right?
It does, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
we've talked extensively about that. Yeah, my intention is to be loved, to experience an abundant amount of joy and laughter, and to grow deep and meaningful connections, right? And that's so broad, but if I can look over my day and was I kind? And I'll give you really good experience yesterday that was super helpful for me. Was I loving? Did I laugh a lot? Did I connect deeply with whomever it is, right? Whether it's my daughter while we're at a doctor's appointment or whether it's a stranger on the street, then I can say, wow, I did really well. But we're constantly shifting and sorting, like you said, we're learning. And so yesterday I am, because I've continued to immerse myself in energy and healing, I'm really, really good at picking up people's energy, right? And so I'm at the phlebotomist. My daughter's getting blood work yesterday, and there's these two absolutely lovely phlebotomists. I mean, just beautiful. They're one of them's terrible at her job, mind you. Like, she messed up my daughter's name, but great energy. So like, I'm just cool with it. I'm like, yeah, you're learning. Mind you, it's not my vein she's spoken. Sorry,
Right.
Billy. But then a third phlebotomist walks in, right? And immediately I'm like, whoa. And I'm watching her engage with her coworkers, and there's just this real fear within her. But where I love this experience was I judged her. Right. And I said point blank out loud, I'm like, wow, I wouldn't want to work with that energy. But as I was going through my night last night, instead of judging myself or beating myself up, I said, okay, if my intention is to be love, did I show up as love? And that experience showed up, and I was like, I didn't. I showed up in judgment. So what was that about? And it wasn't about me judging myself. It was about me learning a lesson that I needed to continue to be open to and hold space for people wherever they're at without expecting them to be differently.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the power of intention. Because if my goal is to be nice to everybody, right, then I'm like, well, I wasn't nice and I'm a mean person, blah, blah, blah. And to your point, now I'm bringing down my energy because I'm in judgment, not only of this poor woman, but of myself as well. And I'm not learning anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just little things like that you can play with that make all the difference throughout the day. I remember when I was really starting to focus more on, I just want to just focus on operating at higher levels throughout my day, no matter what. So I was using little tricks, and I recommend them. I mean, it's like, so when I was driving for Lyft, for example, anytime I got a ride, right, that's leading me towards whatever my intention was for that day in terms of income, right? No matter what. When I got a ride, I'm going to make money on that ride. So at the end of every single ride, person would get out and I would say, thank you, thank you, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I meant it. I meant it.
Yeah, no matter what, you're being in gratitude. Absolutely. Because everything.
Let me just real quick,
Yeah.
it's another one of my pet peeves from an energy standpoint. Being in gratitude, I'm not, saying that anything negative about that. What I'm saying is understanding the energy of words or the energy of what people can use when they're saying I'm grateful, right? So a lot of times when people, not always, but a lot of times when people say, "Man, I'm so grateful I have this," there's an underlying energy there that says in the
I
back of their
don't have
head, because I used to have this that I don't want anymore. And so
that's
now you got a pull struggle, right, going on. Whereas appreciation has no other end of the stick.
mm,
Appreciation, actually break the word down, what does it do? It adds value to. There is no other end of the stick, and it adds value to. And guess what? It appreciates.
oh, that's so good. I like that a lot. Yeah.
So, appreciation is a much cleaner energy, emotional energy. It's also a higher vibrational emotional energy because it really does add value too. So when I'm saying I appreciate that, I'm adding more and more and more and more. I'm getting more and more momentum going for myself every time I think that. So now
Yeah.
I use it whenever I eat. Now I use it. I mean, I use it whenever I drink water. That, oh yeah, I needed that drink of water. So thanks, I appreciate that, and I mean it every time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's more emphasis, but that's my little pet peeve about appreciation and gratitude for what it's worth.
Yeah, no, I mean that's very insightful and I never really like consider that. And when you think about the word appreciate, right, it expands. Appreciate is to grow. And so, yeah, that's very interesting. And, something that you've alluded to, and I really want to dive into extensively on another show, is the power of words.
Mm-hmm.
Because I I mean, you must experience it too. I cannot tell you, myself included, and I love when people call me out on my language, right? The other day I was on a call and I said, I'm a former leader. And the guy was like, but you're a leader. And I'm like, oh my God, you're right. I'm
Yeah.
not a leader in the corporate world, but I'm a leader. And so I appreciated that, right? Because now I realize I've been like creating this resistance to leading because I'm saying I'm a former leader. But
Right.
I hear so many people all of the time talk about the fact that they can't do something, they
Mm-hmm.
should do this, they would do that, it's impossible to do this, they're going to have a bad day, whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no. However, I have to sit there and watch it because, as my beautiful Gail Craft reminded me yesterday, the day before, she's like, you got to let people have their candy, Carrie, meaning you got to let people have their experience, their journey. You can't control their journey. But particularly when it comes to like my daughters, oh my God, the hair on my neck raises every time I hear them say they can't, they won't, they whatever. I'm like, yeah, because you're right. Because you said you can't, spot on. You absolutely can't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Check that one off your list. You'll never do that ever again.
Yeah. It's
Good
so
luck.
true, right? But people don't realize that words were, yeah. Maybe it was you. Were you the one who posted the diagram of abracadabra, breaking down how spelling is literally creating spells over your life through the power of words?
I've posted a couple of those before, I think. Yeah.
It's insane. And so people really like, this is, what I would encourage everybody to do is, if some of what we're talking about seems obscure or really out of reach or just tough to digest, which I get, because again, for me, there were many years when I would hear a lot of this stuff and I'm like, I don't even know what this is. Just at least remain open to the fact that how you speak to yourself impacts your reality. And can you just get curious and maybe one day observe and listen to all of the things that you tell yourself in a given hour, and then start to examine how you experience life because of those words.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and those words have energy, right? Like we've talked about. And Dr. Bruce Lipton, you know, if you want proof of how energy influences your physical body, just look up Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's his work on stem cell research shows definitively beyond any shadow of a doubt that you can have a stem cell grow into any kind of cell you want it to be based on the energetic environment around it.
Yeah. Well,
What's
so
that tell you?
he wrote Biology of Belief, which I love. And I actually encourage a lot of people to read that because it talks about how your thoughts impact the nucleus within your cell.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a little dense, but it's definitely digestible. But also think about it in even simpler forms. And I'm not exactly where this was, but I know it was in Eastern country, maybe in Asia, where there was a gentleman who did 2 cups of ice.
Yeah.
One, he said
Japan.
loving,
Yeah.
kind, joyful words to this cup of ice, and then froze it. And then the other cup of ice,
Water. It was
yeah,
water.
he talked trash. He was demoralizing this water. So then he sticks it in the freezer, and when he comes out, right, there was distinct differences in these 2 cups of ice. One had these beautiful like creations and geometric shapes, and the other was disjointed and all over the place and messy. And it was based on simply the energy and the words that he used while putting this water in this cup.
Yeah. Yeah. They did it. They did another one with a group of children standing around a cup of water and sending just thoughts, no words, just thoughts. They were instructed to send loving thoughts to that cup of water. Then they froze it. And then they were instructed to send hateful thoughts to that cup of water. And it showed the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, as we start to wrap up, guys, we're gonna be doing this show for about 45 minutes to an hour, each Wednesday until it doesn't serve Drew or myself. But I trust that. I don't know. This is fun. I love it.
I do too.
That's my
Yeah.
take on it. Um, my question for you, Drew, is in our first episode, what's one thing you would want to leave our audience with to take with them over the next week about energy and how they can start to shift it?
Start being aware of your thoughts.
So good. Yeah.
Just try to focus on trying to be aware of what you're thinking instead of just automatically thinking it like you're used to, automatically getting worried about this or automatically getting frustrated. Start being aware of what you're thinking. What am I thinking? What am I really thinking? That would be a great place to start.
Yeah. I love that. And I would piggyback on that for my words of wisdom this week. I would say just set an intention to be curious, right? In the morning, you wake up, I'm going to be curious today, because in that curiosity, one, you're now creating the ability, the roadmap to be aware of your thoughts, which Drew is suggesting. And also the things that you will experience will all teach you something that you're meant to learn that you might not have realized without allowing yourself to be curious, because that intention to be curious opens up possibility. It's just like, woo, okay.
Yeah.
And there you go. So
great.
Any parting words, guys? If you're interested in learning more about Drew, please, scan his QR code. Same goes for me. And it's always such a joy and a privilege and a pleasure to talk with you, Drew. I always gain some insight. So thank you for your time. Any thoughts from you?
Same here, Carrie. Really appreciate it. I'm really looking forward to more and more and more of these. And yeah, please, if you guys have anything you'd like us to cover, any topics, any subjects, just get a hold of us. Let us know. We're happy to do it. We'd love to have questions on this. So we're going to be here every Wednesday at noon Eastern time. So Put it in your calendar. We'll be here if you just want to come in and have a fun conversation. You're more than welcome.
Yeah. And lastly, I mean, just a prelude to maybe next week, because we never know, but I would love for you to potentially show the community the table that you created. So Drew was kind enough to
Oh,
offer me an energy healing, and it was very unique. But what I found even more interesting was how it was created. So I'd love to touch upon that. But until then, guys, I will just say be kind to yourself. And I really hope that you can laugh well throughout the day, because a laughter is a quick way to bring that energy up and to remember that life is not meant to be taken so seriously.
perfect.